Yeah. Hello everyone. This is WG4 under that SDK meeting. So we have today listed down a few questions and few questions for the Red Hat team. Basically, Fiacre has started experimenting on the Red Hat Helm Operator SDK, and he has some doubts. And we, in the previous session also we discussed that Bala can help us with that, and Bala has got a few of his team members. So yeah, so I think Fiacre can take over from here, surely.
So before that, yeah, we have Andy and Catherine here from the SDK team. I really want to thank them very much for taking their time. I know they're very busy with both internal and community work. I really appreciate taking time. Andy and Catherine, I'm not sure whether Joe is here yet. Really appreciate it. They have been kindly able to join this meeting, and then they offered us that we could ask them some specific questions and also in general guidance about how to use SDK, etc. Yeah, so with that, Fiacre, please take over.
Fiacre, if you want to share your screen, that's okay.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. 1 second. Desktop. Oh, desktop 2. Yeah. Okay. So should be able to see my screen. Can you? Yeah.
Yes,
we can see
that. Yeah. Again, I will try to.
So Fiacre, before getting into the questions, could you please provide the context, what we are trying to do, what are our goals?
Yeah. So I guess the overall investigation was initiated related to Helm support in Nefio. So we looked at we started looking at a couple of different options. We did look at Flux CD as a deployment option, which is so we have that kind of investigated and reported back to the Nefio community. We started looking at the Helm Operator SDK. As you're aware, again, thank you very much for joining, guys. It's great to have direct engagement with the developers. And I guess the overriding kind of feeling of where we kind of came to was that there were some some issues that we came across in relation to using the tool to generate the operators specifically for this use case. So this the Free5GC Helm charts that are being used in Nefio. I won't go into detail there. I don't know if you have any background knowledge on that, but essentially it's a set of Helm charts simulate or for core telco deployment. And this is what, so we tried to use the operator SDK first of all to generate an operator to handle the top level parent chart, which does have quite a, it has your standard nesting. 1 second. So it just has your standard Helm chart with nested chart dependencies. And with that we came across, I don't know, there were issues in relation to the nesting in the actual chart itself. That's pointing to, and there are some open issues, or I think this one is closed now. But come across a similar scenario where the tool essentially fails to fetch the dependent charts because of I'm hoping you can tell us and maybe put us straight on that. There are some workarounds. The workaround we found was to essentially, when the tool tar GCs the dependencies, essentially to untar them, and then the create API will pick them up. We also found that we needed to give an explicit version in the chart.yaml. I don't know whether this is an issue or I think Tal, you mentioned that we were we were using or we weren't set up correctly. But what we did was, yeah, so we provided an explicit version for the dependent chart, and also have some kind of repo defined as the location for the dependency. That's kind of high level of where we're at. I won't go into we hit some other issues. I guess these are more related to the actual FreeFireGC charts themselves in relation to dependent kernels and stuff like that. And also, what else did we hit? We also found it difficult in terms of how the charts are configured to align with the underlying network and infrastructure which we're using in Nefio. But I guess that's a problem for us to solve if we did go with this route. Yeah, so they were some of the issues that we hit. And I guess so these are some of the stuff that the guys have just added now. GitOps, blah blah blah. I would like to just reference the support level. So as I said, we're looking at the Helm operator specifically, or possibly I think Tal or others mentioned Ansible, but maybe just Helm for now. But I guess this is where the Helm support stops, right? So there's no LCM really support within the operator SDK for Helm. So I guess that's something that's something that's supported by other tools, but I guess not in this scenario. I'll open it there to the guys, maybe to kind of speak to some of that, or how would people like to proceed?
Yeah, let me take a stab. So for the nested chart issue, you mentioned that the GitHub issue was closed. I hadn't followed up on that lately. Is it resolved in a state that it'll work for you, or I see you're showing an open issue?
Yeah, so this one was reopened. So I think the one that the initial one, sorry, now I'm jumping around a bit. The initial one was, I think there was suggested workarounds, and I think it was suggested to close this one, and create a new one. There was another open issue somewhere. I should have it, but yeah. So again, this may not be on the dependencies subcharts of child charts. Remove dependencies per chart, but okay, so this is using the. Sorry, now I should have looked at this in advance. So this was similar to what we were using, so we had, so your dependency, your version, and your repo, and pointing to it using the file syntax, and pretty much identical here. So SDK init pointing at the chart, and it would not found on the dependent chart, and with that. I did have an example up. No, that's a new VM. Sorry, I did have a VM with an example issue, but essentially what it does, the tool itself. So targz's the dependent chart, and stores it in I think the Helm charts directory within the project structure. And when the tool tries to do the create API, it can't find the unpacked version of the chart, if you like. So the workaround that we applied was just to unpack the targz, and it seemed to run okay. I see here, so yeah, it's still under investigation. But I would have assumed
so-
that this would be pretty like that a nested Helm chart is a pretty common thing. So I would have thought that this would be a fairly, sorry, no, that's a bit rude, but I would have thought that this would have arisen earlier, if you like, because nesting in Helm charts is quite common. Um,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it really probably just depends on how many people are actively using this and if they're using it with nested charts. So
got it. Yeah.
in terms of the OLM and operator framework team at Red Hat, we're unfortunately focusing on other efforts right now, but we may be able to get somebody to look into this bug report. But I can't really make any promises there right now.
Sure.
As far as the rest of the things that you have on the screen in terms of GitOps and roadmaps and things, we're actively working on a new version of OLM that is going to be 100% GitOps friendly. So that will be helpful. We have some components and new APIs that are in alpha right now that we can provide some links to, and you all could play around with them if you wanted to. So that covers GitOps friendly support. I'm not sure for the next one on general guidelines and good practices what that's referring to. If somebody could share. Or if not, I can skip.
I'm not sure. So was this Bala or I think Bala's I think Bala stepped away.
Okay. So status on Helm operator plugins repo. Catherine, is that something you can speak to?
Yeah, so I see it has been getting commits, and it's marked as an experimental refactoring of the Helm operator, and it takes a very different approach, right?
Yeah, so I believe this is the most up-to-date repo. So basically, Cube Builder, which is a dependency of the operator SDK, is slowly moving towards what are called phase 2 plugins, which are basically plugins that are pulled in as libraries. And so I believe the Helm operator right now, that repo is in what we lovingly call the 1.5 phase, which is sort of an in-between between phase 1, which is having the plugins actually directly integrated into the operator SDK library, and it's sort of being pulled out. And so I think that's kind of where this is.
Okay.
Did that
Sorry,
yeah,
answer the question?
So it sounds like this is where the roadmap is heading, right? To move everything to these, I would call it runtime runtime plugins, because the way the Helm integration works right now is it generates a lot of code that basically implements the Helm chart, right? But this system does it with runtime, right? You load the chart, and my understanding that this one is far more dynamic. Do I understand it correctly? The difference between the two approaches?
I believe so. The other piece to it as well is I think there may be some wider community that has been kind of taking this and running with it, because as Andy said,
Yeah.
we've kind of been pulling back to refocus on some other stuff in the immediate term. So yeah, so like most of these people I don't actually recognize who they are. So yeah, I think it's possible that we could try to find the upstream working group if they're having a call and try to connect you guys with them.
Yeah, I would say possibly because, well, what is your opinion right now? You know, I think you understand. Here's the most general question, right? We're considering very strongly basing a lot of the Nefio SDK on the operator SDK, which also means, you know, the Helm SDK too. Well, maybe, right? It's one does not necessarily depend on the other. But in terms of pursuing the current Helm approach, which you say is being maybe phased out to something else, is it worth, is it a good idea to invest a lot in the current system, or will it be painful for us later on to transition if a new approach is being taken?
So I don't think it'll necessarily be particularly painful, just because most of what this is doing is scaffolding, right? Like it's just giving you kind of the boilerplate, and then you are doing a whole bunch of you know, customization on top of it to fit your needs for your operator. So I feel like that's, you know, like that sort of baseline is probably reasonable to, you know, like I think any sort of changes to OLM in general that would require changes in the future, we're going to require it regardless of whether you scaffolded your operator from scratch or if you use the operator SDK. So I would say if it saves you time, go for it, right? Like if it saves you time right now, that's probably you know, a reasonable option to pursue.
OLM is not a hard dependency, right?
It's not a hard dependency. The operator SDK is kind of is the intention of it is designed to be sort of the SDK pairing to OLM. I mean, obviously you can make an operator and use it outside of that context. But you know, I think the recommendation, at least from from our perspective of developing kind of both side by side, is that we are kind of going under the assumption that they're being used together, but they don't have to be.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So is there any other question you have, Fiakra, for the team?
Sorry, I was on mute. Sorry, I don't know how to summarize that. Tal, do you have editing rights? Do you want to summarize that maybe? On this document, or
my last two questions there were kind of
would you
answered
mind?
here.
Would you mind updating the document? Sorry, if
Oh,
we get a bit, I'm slightly distracted here, but yeah.
oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, I'm a little bit multitasking.
Do people have editing rights? I think to do, right?
Yeah, I think I can try. Let me see.
So can you put the link to? Did you already put the link in the chat? Okay.
In the
This
Slack?
is the link to the
For this document.
operator.
No, for the document.
Oh, this one should be there. Yeah, right. It should be on the. Yeah, it should be on the.
No, I know it's in the Slack, but for easy access, if it is in the, if you just put a message.
Yes, 1 second.
I'll do
Just
it.
copy the just copy the URL and put that in the
chat
Chat.
window. Done. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my last two questions here regarding a roadmap were kind of answered. It seems like they're moving to this type 2 plugins for Helm. I guess the general question, more broadly speaking, so other than moving plugins to this type 2 system, is there anything general we should know about the operator SDK moving forward that could affect us? Any long-term plans or something that you can share publicly? And I added as a wish list first-class Python support, but I know that's definitely a wish list thing. But it, you know, it goes.
You are welcome to come and collaborate with us on that, because we have a burgeoning. So I would say from my experience with this, I've only been on the team working on this particular piece of the operator framework for less than a year. And my experience with it is that the Java and the Ansible communities are a little bit more active and have regular meetings than the Helm community, as far as I'm aware. So yeah, certainly if you wanted to join the Ansible working group meeting, and I can find a link in a minute to our upstream calendar. That's definitely a great place to talk about like getting Python as a first class language. It wouldn't be something that our team would be able to support, as most, I don't think anybody on our team really has extensive enough Python experience. But certainly within the Ansible community, obviously that's Python based, and most of them are working in Python. So I'm sure if you wanted to join forces with a lot of them to do that, I'm sure you may be able to find interest there in that community.
Thanks. Yeah, I think just thinking out loud here from Nefio's perspective, yeah, all this is good. I assume, and I used to work for Red Hat as well, that the community is really great and very welcoming, and we definitely, if we want to build things, we can definitely join. For us, it's a matter of trade-offs, right? We have a lot of work to do ourselves, and to an extent, we were hoping maybe to have another community support us here. So I think for us, we would have to consider all the trade-offs and our own decision-making process, right? So this is why this meeting is happening, just to clarify where things are. But I think it's very helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Is there a dedicated Slack channel? I know there's an operator SDK dev Slack channel on the
Yes, so that's our
Kubernetes.
main. Yep, that's our main channel.
That's the
And
main
actually,
channel,
if you
okay.
go at the top, that OF community meetings, I believe that link in the like right underneath operator SDK dev in the sorry, in the by where it says pinned, yeah, sort of down a little bit.
Down a bit. Sorry.
There's like a sort of like a toolbar underneath the operator SDK dev where you just were. That says OF community meetings. No. Go back up to the hashtag operator SDK dev little drop down. Yep, and then just yep, right there.
Sorry.
Yep,
yes. Yep. Sorry. Apologies.
No worries. So that if you, oops, you may have to click it again because it killed the ad.
Sign in.
Yeah.
Ad.
Yeah, so basically Mondays at 2 p.m. Eastern, so 7 p.m. your time, is the Operator SDK working group meeting. So that happens every Monday. In addition, I believe once a month there is an Ansible working group meeting as well. So that's another good one to potentially attend, especially if you're, so it happened last week, for example, on the 18th. So yeah, so that's another good one to attend if you are specifically interested in Python.
Cool. Yeah, that's more. Yeah, 5 p.m. meetings are always great. Thank you.
So I had one small question, like for the Helm operator, do you have some sort of active meetings or active support? Do you have?
So as far as I know, the community isn't as active as the Ansible and the Java community. So they, as far as I know, they don't have a meeting. But yeah, the Ansible and the Java ones are pretty active. So that plus the general SDK one are good places to get support both for Helm and Ansible.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. So all the questions in this list are done, I think.
So one thing I was interested, since nephew, Catherine and Andy, nephew is heavily GitOps based, so that's why the GitOps. Sorry, I was away. This might have answered. I had to be away for a couple of minutes. So is there anything that can be shared at the how, what is the meaning of GitOps friendly support for in the nephew, sorry,
Yeah.
in the SDK perspective, so that we can try to correlate?
The link I posted in chat that says OLM v1 info has our current documentation on where we're headed. The short version is we are doing new APIs that are all GitOps friendly.
Okay. So probably we should add this link, Sandeep, to the document if you're not added already.
Sure, I will do that right now. I don't know why I can't use the.
Sure, sure. We'll add that. I've taken that. And
Cool. Thanks, Andy. Yeah. So probably,
Okay.
yeah, we'll take a look at that and see. It's kind of interesting for me because the philosophy of it's entirely GitOps based Nephia, so we had to see. So from the community perspective, any other question on other than the Helm, direct CRD to the happy path operator support? Do we have any questions for the Andy and Catherine? I think that one is straightforward, right? Yeah.
I think it's a good chance for everyone to take this opportunity because we may not get this again. So any doubts you have, like especially on this, can be.
I guess it was kind of answered already, but in terms of the focus on how I guess you're saying Ansible and the others are kind of they get more attention, more traction. Is the Helm support quiet, if you like, in terms of its use, or do you have kind of feedback on that?
I mean, I certainly think people are using it. I've certainly heard of people using it. I think, as you could see with the calendar, they don't necessarily, meet on regular cadence to try to push the roadmap forward for that particular community. So, obviously, if that's something that you're really interested in, you're always welcome to start. One of those meetings. But like I said, if you come to the general upstream operator SDK meeting, that is a good place to get questions answered or, try to connect with other people who are using Helm.
Is it seen also only as a transitioning, if you like, to a full operator approach? Do end users kind of use it as a stopgap solution and then move to a fully kind of operatorized approach, or is it,
maybe I don't
like
really understand what you mean.
So if you look at
basically it's meant to scaffold an operator, right? So
yeah,
I don't think the intention is ever for it to be a full-fledged operator by itself. It's more just to help you, bootstrap all of the boilerplate files and everything that you would need to have in place to build your own operator, so that especially if you're building multiple operators or this is your first time, it's a good way for you to just have out of the box. Yeah, exactly. And then you can just modify those things going forward versus having to copy paste and get all that boilerplate from scratch.
Yeah, I guess that kind of fulfills the aim here, doesn't it, guys? From Tal or whatever, in terms of the, obviously it allows people to onboard quickly, but obviously with a view to move to operator focused approach. Would I be wrong?
Yep.
Yep.
For me, it's all about, I mean, from the beginning, as I was telling it again, that life cycle management is what I was like personally was looking for. So maybe that we can work it out. If we really want to go in this direction, we need to see if that support comes in. Right. So
from this diagram, it doesn't seem to be.
Yeah. So. Because ultimately my understanding of Nephew is going in that direction only, right? Once you have deployed it, you want to manage it, you want to update it, you want to scale it up, and based on your API calls. So maybe something that we have to look into that. If the port is there, can we move forward that, or as Tal was saying, maybe contributions is also possibility if we really go in that direction. So yeah, that's the thing which I would like to see if we go in this one. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna head back, but
So,
thank you very much, guys. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Paolo.
one question, sorry. There's a couple of questions. One, Andy, Catherine, I mean, in terms of, sorry, I did not take a look at the GitHub transaction set, but in terms of development, do you think the Helm is something, in terms of, even though there are no active community meetings, in terms of its development, do you think it's active? I mean, I mean, it may not be as active as other. My other question is the activity become dormant in from the Helm support perspective?
Not not like the OLM v1 work, no.
I think the
Okay.
primary activity is going on in Helm operator plugins. And even then, the primary place I know is there's another Red Hat team, ACS, that has a fork of Helm operator plugins, where they're using that a lot themselves, but they've got a fork because we weren't able to keep up with all the changes that they were asking us to make there. So they've tried to upstream a bunch of that stuff, and a lot of it has been pulled in, but not all of it. And that's been more recent than most of the things going on in the operator SDK Helm operator code base. So I guess my answer would be it's somewhat low activity, but if there is any activity, the primary place is in the Helm operator plugins repo.
Cool. Thank you so much. Hey, Joe, thanks for joining. I didn't notice.
Yeah, sorry I was late, guys. I was on a
No problem.
separate customer call.
No problem. Thanks. Hey, Joe is also one of the top contributors from Red Hat for the operator framework. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for joining. Cool. And then is there any mailing list other than the Slack? Just wanted to understand, or Slack is the best way?
There is a Google group. It's called Operator Framework. Catherine, I don't know if you have it off the top of your head, but it's like Operator Framework SDK or Operator SDK or one of those that would cover everything for Helm operator.
Yeah, let me grab the link.
Yeah, and Catherine is doing that. Any other questions, team?
Well, I guess if there's a communication channel of some sort exactly for the people working on that operator plugins repo, it doesn't sound like the Helm operator community is very organized right now, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is like a specific channel for them. Or I think maybe you guys just don't know for sure.
You can use the GitHub repo. Like you can create issues or discussions.
Okay,
Yeah.
and yeah, just ask there if there's some. Okay.
Yeah, I would encourage that. And then if you guys already talked about the upstream operator SDK dev channel, that would be the best place to ping us if you're not getting the amount of attention that you think you need on issues that show up in the repo.
Maybe a different kind of question here. For the operator SDK folk, is this exciting at all for you that there's this project called Nefio that might be interested in building an SDK on top of this? Is this something that you would encourage and want to help with and participate with? Or is this being one other user among very many of the operator SDK?
I mean, I don't know that we know enough about Nefio and what you all would put in your SDK to really be able to say. Like I wouldn't say, oh no, just another another user here. Like that's definitely not how we'd be approaching it. We certainly love to see folks who are able to use the bits of operator framework that are useful for them. So it's definitely a positive thing.
Yep, I agree. I don't know how much you guys know, but Operator SDK itself is just built on top of an extension framework that's in KubeBuilder. And it's essentially like this plugin. There's been various iterations of this plugin API that existed. Right now, Operator SDK is based on what KubeBuilder calls the Phase 1.5 plugin, which is essentially you can build your own subcommands that implement KubeBuilder CLI interfaces, essentially. That KubeBuilder, like if you use KubeBuilder libraries to sort of build all of this, like it's really easy then to go and just implement just the pieces you need that can scaffold different type of stuff. Like Operator SD, KubeBuilder has a Go plugin that knows how to scaffold Go operators. SDK uses KubeBuilder's libraries to implement like the Helm plugin, and there's an Ansible plugin. And so like in the SDK repo, there's not a whole lot more code that we have to write other than like, here's all the templates that we're going to use to scaffold out a Helm operator rather than a Go operator. So yeah, I'm not sure what you're going for with an SDK, but I would almost suggest like, it almost sounds like you guys are building something that if you're going to build on top of like the Helm operator plugin, like absolutely, that's something that's also supported. There's like this chaining thing that you can do where you can say like, okay, use SDK's Helm plugin, but then also use my own plugin to do some other modifications and stuff like that. So yeah, I would say this is exciting. And then lastly, one thing that we haven't had the time to do, but has been on the back burner and is still on the plate at some point eventually, maybe, is there's a phase 2 plugin thing in KubeBuilder that essentially lets you run completely external executables to implement the plugin APIs. And that will be nice because then we can start distributing plugins without having to recompile the implementation of those plugin updates into the Operator SDK binary itself. I don't know, there's probably a little bit of documentation about that in the KubeBuilder repo. But that might be interesting for you guys too, if you don't want to have to, rebuild the entire thing. If you just want to ship a single plugin executable that does just that stuff. So yeah, there's lots of stuff. Like the SDK team did a lot in the upstream KubeBuilder community to make it more extensible. And yeah, it's exciting to see other use cases for that same sort of extension mechanism.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting aspect for us. Our SDK, we're still working on defining its scope and what it's going to do exactly, but some of it, without a doubt, will involve this kind of scaffolding that is generating, allowing. So the SDK specifically is about taking telco network functions and onboarding them not only to Kubernetes, but to our Nefio environment, which will include various extensions to Kubernetes, utility operators, and a certain data model coming from a management cluster. So there will be some scaffolding that we'll want to generate. I have personal concerns about code generation and what it means in terms of upgrades, right? You release a new version, and but you already have code that's been tested and maintained. And what do you do now? Do you regenerate, go back to your point one? So that's why I'm kind of interested in the more dynamic approaches that can load a Helm chart, for example, and use it. But yeah, this is diving into more details that I think we'll have to do our own homework and research these various approaches. Another point I maybe add to what we're doing here is that Helm is in a way a transition for us, or at least for some of us. This is also a matter for debate within the community here. So yes, we want first-class support for Helm charts, but we want the ability to start with the Helm chart and add various day 2 reconciliation logic that is impossible to do in Helm. Right? The limitations of Helm is all it can do is really update your Kubernetes resources. But with telco workloads, the point is to make day 2 changes that don't disconnect stateful connections, right? So there's some vendor-specific logic that happens. You know, think of something like a database operator, like MongoDB or MySQL. It's not enough just to create pods and services. You also need to do some heavy lifting in terms of the ordering and workflow. So that kind of logic Helm cannot do, but you can do with Go code in an operator. So some sort of hybrid approach is what's pretty attractive here, right? Because you can you create the scaffolding around a Helm chart, but then you can take the reconcile function and add any Go code you want there, right? So eventually, maybe you'll be able to remove the Helm chart entirely and just rely entirely on the operator to generate all the resources from the start. Anyway, I'm just sharing our thinking. Nothing has been really finalized. We're still, as a community, trying to decide on the best approach. And I think it's exciting.
Yeah, I would encourage you guys to also talk to the StackRox ACS Red Hat folks, because they have basically the exact same sort of use cases that you just described.
Cool, Joe. I'll internally connect with you. If you could give me a lead internally, that'd be great.
Yep, we can chat.
Cool. Thanks, Joe. Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
I'll hand back to you, Sandeep.
Yeah. I
Again,
think is there any? Yeah, I mean, I had a few more questions, but I mean, what Tall asked is kind of similar thing. Maybe it'll be too much digging into the thing. What he says is correct, that we should go back and do our thing. And like my aim was always to see the day 2 and reconciliation and life cycle, all those things. So maybe how much time, if we go in this direction, how much time does it takes us to go into that sort of stage is what I'll be looking to. And maybe I'll do some background and come back with the questions. Maybe I'll join the Slack for this. So I think we have 15 minutes for that. So if there's no more question for the Red Hat teams, I think we can see our original list for the SDK, and maybe Steven can come in and check what are the status for everything, and if you have update for any of the tasks which we had listed down in SDK. So if there's no question, then I would say thank you very much to the Red Hat team for joining, and that was we really appreciate that, and we would definitely like to connect because it is a viable solution which we're looking for, right? And thank you for that.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Catherine.
Yeah,
Andy,
thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Thank-
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Cheers.
Right, Steven, would you like to check out all those task lists, or shall I open it
Yeah,
up?
yeah. Let's do that. Let me see.
Yeah.
I
We
have
have
it on.
another 30
I have it
minutes
on
for
a
that.
different window,
Yeah.
a different user.
Yeah, and,
Okay.
and then so if Ekra or Steve or Sandeep, let's please capture all the links that Red Hat team has
Yeah.
provided.
Yeah, sure.
Jill has provided some, Catherine has some. So let's make sure we capture
Yeah.
all the links, the notes
Yeah.
before, otherwise we're
Yeah.
gonna lose it.
Yes, I'll copy all of them, and I think we have already added. Let me catch
Will do,
it.
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. The computer is incredibly slow.
Are you working too much on that?
Yeah, I'm trying. I don't know what happened. But then I'm in a conference room, and then I think what happened is I use the Zoom, and then I project the Zoom onto through Google Meet. So there's like 2 meetings going on. So I can
Yeah,
use
you can see it.
the big monitor. Oh well, it's probably not a good idea. Anyway, okay.
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay. So So I guess the whole thing of Aerial Mon is we are building a operator SDK, operator space SDK, not to be confused with the operator dash SDK. And one of the things is we would obviously like to start off and reconcile our particular CLs. And I think folks that sign up for that, Vim, Liam, and is fun. So is there any news in terms of what approaches that you folks want to take? Yeah, have you investigated if we want to, as the operator SDK team said, we can build a wrapper on top of that using CLI extensions, or is there some other approaches that you folks are looking at?
Well, it's with me here. I think there is two aspects here, right? So one is the scaffolding part, right? I don't see a reason why we should not use the plugin framework that is in KubeBuilder, right? I personally have some experience with that, so I think it's a good framework to help with the scaffolding. But I think it's too early because to do that, because we have to agree on the approach on how what to scaffold, right? The problem is that unless you know what to scaffold, there's no point in creating a plugin. I mean, there is various examples. I think Catherine shared some of them, right, that are used right now. And my proposal would be that
they themselves are using the using KubeBuilder. They just plug in on top of KubeBuilder.
Yes, yeah, indeed. So it's basically extensions in KubeBuilder, and then you have some frameworks to scaffold, like your main.go file or whatever file that you believe. It could be a configuration file or something like that. So it could be whatever we believe we have to do. But my point is a little bit, okay, I think please scaffolding makes sense from the moment you have a framework that you believe you are behind, right? And that's probably the first step that we have to resolve before we can do that part. At least that's my view on that.
Another thing for this task is it may have a dependencies on the thing that is going on in converging all the CLDs into a single one, the NF deployment.
Yes, so but even there, right? Even there, the thing is that, yeah, I think for me, scaffolding makes sense from the moment you know the framework that you agree upon, right? And of course, so that's the new API thing we have to integrate for sure. But I think the more important is also the structure of the rest of the system, right? So for example, if you take the Helm operator, there's a specific scaffolding that happens based on the Helm chart, right? Based on the values of the YAML file and stuff like that, that you scaffold the project. So the same applies to us probably, right? Because we need, from my perspective, we need to do, I'm still believe that we need to do the sandwich approach where you do some
that's actually a great question. But this is not I mean, this material test, I didn't put it in as like a Helm related thing. So I just want to have a front
correct,
end. Just have a front end where
me,
if someone wants to create, then the reconciler is already partly implemented. But yeah, that said, you know.
Because here there's the other I think thing we have not really discussed so far at the moment, which goes into the full day 2 operation, right? So from my perspective, so I think we have to split up the various tasks that needs to happen on a network function, right? And what am I saying is there is one, so there is a task to say deploy, right? But there is task to say, okay, there's an event happening or there's something happens and you have to react. That so there can be another controller that it doesn't have to be one and the same reconcile loop that does all of that, right? So you can actually split these things into various pieces. So that's, I think right now we are focused really on the life cycle of the deployment side of things, right?
Yeah.
At least that's my view.
The second part is a much bigger discussions. I think we have talked about that when we started this SDK effort. Fiakar actually asked whether or not we have done enough to show that we can convince vendors that transition from Helm to operator framework is actually a good idea. And I do think we have to do that. Not SDK, but in the whole community in general. And that's a different conversation, obviously. But then for now, when we want to get vendors on board, we just want to have a published SDK where it make things easier for them. So that's probably the more of the area one thing.
Yeah.
Tal,
So
what
I'm trying to.
yeah. Okay.
Maybe before Tal goes, let me finish one more
go.
thought, right? Because the way I'm approaching is the following. So my approach that I'm taking is this, right? Is I think we have to do some pre-processing based on our API, right? So that's for me, whether we then use Helm or whether we do it all within the same framework is for me an option, right? So it doesn't preclude one or the other. So for me, both options should be part of the same framework. So that's how I'm looking at it. And the way what I'm exploring is to build that SDK with as little code that you have to write as a consumer. So yes, ideally so zero.
Right. Yeah. Well,
so that's basically how yeah. So I think I have a way to do zero, right? You will see hopefully soon. And that's that's my approach basically.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, yeah, that is the point. The point is, you're right, a little code as possible. And another point is, hopefully you don't have to learn Go, because that's when we find out about the hour and time frame is that's actually an obstacle. And then B, we also think that maybe we kind of get the Kubernetes client complexity out of that if we can. So that's those two. But yeah, I mean, obviously the goal of SDK is always spreading as little as possible for our consumers. Go ahead, Tal. Sorry.
Okay, let's Tal.
Yeah, there are just so many options on our table, right? And I don't want us to forget Samsung's contribution. I'm putting a link here to the repo. In the next few days, there'll be code there. They'll be sharing the code there, and I think that'll give us an opportunity to evaluate it ourselves. My own thinking on this has kind of evolved. I'm at the point where I think it's important to recognize two different kinds of phases that a vendor might be in. One is a vendor has Helm charts right now, is thinking of eventually moving to operators, but it's not right now on the roadmap. And as Stephen pointed out, it's really important to show the value. Why transition to operators, right? So far, our operators have been doing nothing, right? They're basically reduplicating what Helm does. So in a very, very complicated way. So like imagine using the operator SDK, a lot of work to generate the scaffolding, package everything. At the end of the day, functionally, it's equivalent to just using the Helm command with Flux, right? So the KISS principle for me would say just use Flux, or I would say Flux/config sync. We haven't really looked at it, but config sync can do exactly what Flux does, just explode the Helm chart and install it locally. We didn't really test it, but that's also an option, right? Although it does mean config sync becomes more of a dependency, right? So the advantage of Flux is that you can deploy it separately. And of course, config sync can also deploy the Flux operator, right, without a problem. So there might be an advantage there for us choosing Flux to remove a specific dependency on config sync, but still worth looking at. I think there's an advantage to choosing more than one option for support, right? So for example, we can say that for the first class of operators who just the first class of vendors who are just interested in putting their network functions in the Nefio world right now, the Flux-based approach /config sync would be the most straightforward, right? And it requires almost no work, almost no effort from us. I mean, there's some specific issues there that we have to look at and possibly fixing in Flux. We can look at that. But for vendors who are interested in transitioning from Helm to a Go-based operator, then yeah, the scaffolding approach I think is very strong. So we can do both, right? We can say we support both the simple approach of just getting Helm on board and a more complicated approach of transitioning to a complete Go operator. But there's another elephant in the room, which is the work that Open Air Interface has done using KOPF, 100% in Python, right? And the KOPF library seems very powerful to me, but it's unrelated to the operator SDK entirely, right? This is why I raised the question, if operator SDK eventually wants to make Python as a first-class citizen, then we can use that instead of KOPF to support Python-based operators, right? But that doesn't exist right now. It's on my wish list, right? If it did exist, I think that would be a strong option on the table to move everything to operator SDK eventually, because it could support multi-languages, right? It does support Java, as we said. You know, there is a Java community, which is another option. we just have a lot of options on the table, but I would say I would categorize them generally in terms of the quick and easy, just getting Helm on board, and the more complicated ones that involve a transition to a full-blown operator. But until we actually prove that operators are really powerful, there's not a very strong incentive. It's mostly been theoretical, right? Everything I just discussed right now in terms of making day 2 changes that that keep connections intact. You know, something like a self-healing scenario, a use case, right? Our use cases so far haven't included much work on the edge cluster at all, right? They've been really focused in R1 on the shift left approach and doing everything using Porch and the upgrades there. But, you know, looking at, for example, the service assurance use case coming from SIG 1, right? Some of the control loops, there's a control loop that obviously involves Porch as well. And you can do things like scaling in, scaling out by bumping your deployment package, right? Making a change in the topology there. But in terms of things like maintaining connections and things like that, you have to do them at the edge with the operator. So that's a smaller control loop that's focused entirely on the workload cluster. Until we have those use cases and actually prove the viability of operators, we're kind of working in a theoretical space here, right? Mm-hmm. So my current thinking is that we can do both approaches, right? Support a quick and easy way to get Helm on board, something like Flux. And then also in part of our Nefio SDK, find a way to allow Helm-based packaging to transition to a more full-blown operator package. And really, the Helm wrapper part of the operator SDK is kind of great in that regards, because you can still use Helm for your day 1 topology, but then add Go code that would focus on day 2 control loops and reconciliations, right? That happen in the cluster there. And then you're leaving Helm behind, right? Helm is just for day 1. And then day 2, you're doing your own specialized code. Yeah, we're out of time, but I feel like, from my perspective, I feel like we're moving somewhere. we are getting more knowledge and to help us make the decision. But we still have too many options on the table.
Yeah, in my opinion, I mean, obviously we're out of time, but I'll just make a quick point that yes, it depends upon what we want, what is our vision, and what we want to go, which direction we want to go, like what kind of we can answer the thing if we are able to answer that, what kind of a benefit people will get coming to the operator. And that is the direction I feel personally, if we go, and we'll have a right answer which direction to go. But as I understand from the community that right now the approach is let's support everyone so that everybody gets onboarded. So I kind of agree that if these 2-3 options, if you provide at the same time, you know, initial SDK, like whatever you want to choose, you choose both, 2-3 things are there. I think that will be the right and, you know, appropriate approach, you know. Yeah.
I think I want to have one remark, Tal. In my view, I mean, the pure Flux and config sync approach is not working for us. And I think
support is a TSC mandate, so the SDK has to have some way.
Yeah, sure. But I think we also have to, I think, agree on the principles that what we want to solve, right? And if the current framework that we have, I think I said it multiple times in the meantime, but pure Flux and Helm, pure Flux and config sync are not working for us. And unless we change our framework, if we say that this is mandatory, we have to change the framework. And I think probably because there is lots of options on the table, but if at some point some of them don't work, then we better move on and dismiss them, or do some change that we say, okay, we have to include them. And that's how I look at the current thing. If I look to the current framework, some of these things, in my view, are not sufficient for what we want to achieve.
Yeah.
But okay,
Right,
I'll leave it like that.
Yeah. Point taken, actually. So I personally have few more options, I think, to add as areas. I'll discuss with Stephen, like to have more capabilities of SDK, and that will be for the next week, I think. So
well, so
I
we
think,
are obviously something we haven't talked about. Hopefully, we'll talk about next week. Is that we have a pretty big slot for this on the summit. So folks that are there's several folks that already signed up to be interested to speak. So that I encourage folks to come up and say what do they really want out of the SDK. And then folks that are presenting, we should get together and plan for what we want to present. Until then, we only get through one area, so let's hopefully folks are making progress.
Yeah, you've been very cooperative. Thank you very much for that, and Tal as well. Okay, I think we are out of time, and we can close in now, and further on this we can discuss next week to have. Thank you very much. Have a nice time.
Thank
Thanks,
you, guys.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.